Okay, now let's move on to the Buckeyes on the field. A much more pleasant topic. They've looked very good. You could argue they really haven't been tested yet. You've seen a lot of Ohio State football over the years. What's your impression of this team been as you've watched it?
It's my 15th year covering these guys. I think they are as complete as any team I've covered. Obviously, the 2014 team that won the national championship had talent all over the field. They took a little time to grow into that. I've always said the 2005 team, which is the first team I covered that lost to Texas at home and lost to Penn State that year, probably was as good as any team I saw. But I think when you combine everything that's happening with this team, which is the quarterback play, which is the depth of elite talent defensively, really good schematic coaching so far through 6 games on both sides of the ball. I've said all year, I feel like the greatest strength of this team is that it doesn't have an obvious weakness. And I can go back through even the best Ohio State teams I've covered and usually say, well, this team wasn't so great at this or this team wasn't so great at that. It's much harder to do with this team right now.
Currently ranked 4th in the country in most of the polls and those kind of things. Really haven't been tested yet. Is that more a testament to how well they've played as opposed to who they've played, or is it a little bit of both, you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's both. They're going to have 2 top 10 teams here in the second half of the season with Wisconsin and Penn State, and I think those are both good teams in very different ways. So those will be real tests. Michigan remains a top 20 team, although they certainly have their flaws. Michigan State's a good defense. Michigan State doesn't do much offensively. Michigan State's a good defense, and Ohio State almost put up 600 yards on them. Cincinnati has looked pretty good since getting its doors blown off in Ohio Stadium. So part of it is that, yeah, Ohio State's actually played a couple teams that are okay and made them look terrible. But certainly the issue a lot of times is when you're trying to talk about Big Ten teams in a national perspective is their schedule going to be good enough for them to get the respect they deserve? And I do think with the Wisconsin and Penn State tests coming up, with the way those 2 teams have played, if Ohio State wins out and beats those teams, Ohio State certainly will get that respect. But part of their problem now is they're just so good, they're making their opponents look bad, even when those opponents aren't such terrible teams.
Well, and we were a little concerned because you weren't exactly sure what you were going to get at quarterback with Justin Fields. You've got a pretty good quarterback there who's put himself, I think, right in the middle of that Heisman race if he continues to play the way he has.
His raw stats don't stack up with some of the other guys like former Ohio State quarterback Joe Burrow, who's lighting it up at LSU, and Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts and some of those guys. But, I mean, he's done everything they've asked, right? So J.K. Dobbins has run the ball really well. The defense has been really good. But Justin Fields has been, I feel like, in total control almost of every single game, of almost every single snap. He is dynamic. He can make big throws. He's made as many big-time throws. Statistically, they measure that kind of stuff. He's made as many big-time throws as basically any quarterback in the country. They just maybe aren't trying that as much. They haven't run him all that often because they don't need to. They save it for the red zone. They get banged for the buck. When he runs, he's dynamic. So I've been impressed most with the way that he has been seemingly in control of snap to snap, that he's been very steady. He's been very accurate with the ball. He can get out of the pocket and do some really athletic things, but he's looked like a guy who's certainly, I feel like, he looks like he started for more than a year, and actually he just got on campus in January.
What about some of the things that impress you that maybe are flying under the radar a little bit for most folks? What about this team has really kind of, opened your eyes and said, well, that's pretty good?
I think the offensive line has played well. That's 4 out of 5 new starters for this season on that offensive line, but they have a lot of highly recruited guys on there. They have a graduate transfer from Rutgers who has played before. I think they have been dominant at times, especially in their run blocking. And so, again, it's not a shock when you have guys who are national top 50 recruits like Wyatt Davis and Josh Myers doing that, but they're first-time starters. And then the secondary, Jeff Okudah is a guy at corner who is being looked at as a potential top 10, maybe top 5 NFL draft pick. Everybody knows he's great, but I think that whole secondary has played very well. Shaun Wade has played well. Damon Arnett has played well. Again, part of the issue in the Big Ten right now is not just this year, but almost every year, the Big Ten doesn't have elite quarterbacks. they don't have guys that test you week after week. Even when Wisconsin and Penn State play Ohio State, that's not what those teams do best. So if Ohio State makes the playoff and they run into Jalen Hurts or Tua Tagovailoa or Trevor Lawrence or Joe Burrow or a guy or Jake Fromm or a guy like that, then we're going to see. But for now, this pass defense is really, really hard to throw on for anybody in this conference.
The other thing that I'll ask you, kind of wrapping up our thoughts about Ohio State, how impressed are you, and you touched on it a little bit, just the way this defense has played. It was a little bit of a mess last year, and it's been really, really solid, bordering on very good so far this year.
Yeah, 9 starters back. Again, a lot of highly recruited guys in there, and it sort of make you shake your head more about what those former defensive coaches were doing last year to sort of get these guys to look like they couldn't play defense when now they're letting them play. We've talked about it a million times. They're just letting them, they simplified it a little bit. The guys have more confidence. But again, I've done this for 15 years. I think Chase Young is probably the best defensive end I've covered here, and that includes 2 Boses and Vernon Golston and a bunch of guys who were drafted in the top 10. I think Jeff Okudah might be the best cornerback I've covered here. That includes Marshawn Lattimore and Denzel Ward and Bradley Roby and first-round guys. They have some really high-end guys, and the scheme is letting them show how good they are.